You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. I often say that I don't do this show for me, I do it for you. So I talk not about things necessarily that I'm anxious to talk about, but the things that I think you would find interesting based on having my finger on the pulse for a long time here. And I got this message via Instagram. You can always follow me on any of the socials, just at Matt Moscona. And this was from Asia Willis, who said, Matt, I'd love it if you did a first-year review on Brian Kelly. How high are you on him in terms of what was accomplished year one and how you feel about next year, or have all the doubters shut up? So I figured this is a good opportunity because USA Today put out their grades, their season grades for all 131 FBS teams. There were only 5 schools that got an A+. 5 programs got an A+. Georgia, of course, won the national championship. They got an A+. Tennessee, 11-2, got an A+. Troy, with their turnaround at 12-2, TCU, their turnaround from 6 wins to 13-2, playing for the national championship, got an A+. And how about Tulane? Tulane Greenway, 12-2, also got an A+. And there are considerably more programs that got an A grade. UConn, Duke, Florida State, which of course had a dramatic turnaround to 10 wins. James Madison at 8-3. Kansas, which finished the season 6-7. UConn and Kansas each finished 6-7 with a losing record, but both got an A. That goes to show you, expectation versus reality. And there's LSU with an A grade at 10-4. Michigan, New Mexico State, Oregon State, Penn State, South Alabama, Washington, the others that got an A grade. You may find this interesting. There is one school, one out of 131, one that got an F. You want to guess? Go ahead, Muse.
UMass.
It was not UMass.
Oh, God, how is it not UMass?
Suffice to say, expectations.
That's fair.
Suffice to say, what was a school that had very, very high expectations this year?
I think I know who
that
it
had
was.
very, very, very poor results.
Texas A&M!
You nailed it. Texas A&M at 5-7. The lone school, one out of 131. One out of 131. Texas A&M got an F. Like Oklahoma, by contrast, got a D. It's just really fun to laugh at them, isn't it? Like, isn't it? It's just really fun to laugh at them.
Yes. It's one of the best things ever.
I know. So I figured let's take a look at the LSU season, because the question we got on Instagram, it's again at Matt Moscona on Instagram from Asia Willis. You asked, how would you rate Brian Kelly's season based on what the expectations were? Well, the expectations on this team in Vegas were 7-5. We're 7.5 wins thereabouts, where you saw LSU. So people were looking at like Georgia tried to play the y'all said we were going to go 7-5 card when no one did, but legitimately that was a projection that a lot of people had for LSU, was at 7-5, 6-6 type range. I had them 8-4. Said their ceiling was 9-3. They went 9-3, won the bowl game, which is awesome. I think they hit their ceiling this year, which means they deserved an A. I mean, they maximized what they could do this year. But I figured let's take a quick second here and look at the offense. Next segment, we'll come back and look at defense, special teams relative to what expectations were coming in, and kind of gauge how this season went for the Tigers. So we'll start on the offensive side at quarterback. And I don't know how you could give Jaden Daniels anything other than an A grade. Could he have gotten to that A+? Could it have been better? Was it flawless? Certainly wasn't flawless, but Jaden Daniels accounted for nearly 70% of your offense this year. He threw for 2,900 yards. He ran for 885, so 900 yards rushing. Sack adjusted, he was over 900 yards rushing. So you're talking about a guy that accounted for 11 rushing touchdowns, threw for 17. So on the season, accounted for 28 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions, threw for 2,900 yards, which is the 5th highest total in program history. Jaden Daniels ran for 885. He was your leading rusher. It was a dramatic improvement at the quarterback position. And to be clear, Max Johnson wasn't bad a year ago. He threw for 2,800 yards, but wasn't nearly the dynamic threat running the football that Jaden Daniels was, and didn't take on as much of the offense. And the most obvious way we could state it is, a year ago, LSU, with Jake Peets calling plays, racked up 368 yards per game and an average of 26 points per game. Again, a year ago, 26 points per game. This year, LSU averaged 453 and 34.5 points per game. So you averaged nearly 100 more yards per game offensively and 8 points per game. So more than a touchdown per game more offensively. So it's hard to look at the offense as anything but a gigantic step up. There was a spot where I thought LSU took a step back, and that was at the running back position. Remember, a year ago, we were wondering who was going to take the mantle in 2021 and take that baton, and it ended up being Ty Davis-Price. Ty Davis-Price ended up rushing for over 1,000 yards a year ago, and remember, he did have the single-game rushing record against Florida. But even after Ty Davis-Price in his 1,000-yard season, you had another back in Corey Kiner rush for over 300 yards, and you had 4 in total approach or exceed that number. The problem that LSU had this year is you did not have a running back really establish themselves as a bell cow. There was not a single running back on the team that exceeded 100 rushes on the season. Josh Williams was your leading running back. Jaden Daniels was your leading rusher at 885. Williams was your leading running back at 532. So Jaden Daniels ran for 350 more yards than your leading running back, and Josh Williams only had 97 carries. Now, part of that was injury, and he missed several games, and had he played a full 14-game schedule, he certainly would have gone over that 100 rushing total and would have had closed the gap with the number with he and Jaden Daniels. But you didn't get enough production out of the running back spot. Noah Cain, 400 yards. John Emery, 375. Armani Goodwin, 267. You had a lot of guys that contributed, but nobody that proved they could be the bell cow, meaning carry the ball 150, 200 times in a season. And you had that a year ago, and you're going to need to establish that next year. I thought your receivers this year actually were better than they were a year ago. That might sound a little complex, but after Kayshon Boutte's injury, you ended up with really 3 receivers that put up really good numbers. You had Jack Bech, you had Kayshon Boutte, you had Malik Neighbors. And also, you had Jeray Jenkins, who had a nice season as well. But this year, Malik Neighbors went over 1,000 yards. You didn't have that a year ago. And then you had Kayshon at 538, Mason Taylor at tight end at 414, but Jeray over 400 yards, Brian Thomas at 361, Kyron Lacey at 268. When you look at the number of double-digit receivers with double-digit receptions, Malik Neighbors, Kayshon Boutte, Jeray Jenkins, Brian Thomas, Kyron Lacey, Jack Bech, and Chris Hilton had 7. But so 7 receivers that had double-digit receptions. That's not even including Mason Taylor, who had 38, Josh Williams, who had 21, John Emery, who had 13. So a really good year for LSU's receivers that were actually better than a season ago. And I don't know if you would agree with me here, but I would actually say the offensive line was a push from year to year. And it deserves some explanation, because a year ago, remember, you returned all of your starters from 2020. You had your entire offensive line back, and it was a veteran group, but they really struggled early in the season with a new offensive line coach coming in Brad Davis. But by the time you got to the second half of the season, they became a really good group that was becoming more productive, especially in the run game. That's when you saw Ty Davis-Price have his really great second half of the season behind that veteran offensive line. Well, you lose Austin Deculus. Liam Shanahan was a 2-year starter at center for you. You lost a lot of guys there. Of course, Chasen Hines, Ed Ingram, all those guys that had been stalwarts and had started a lot of games for you. You punted there to a much less experienced line this year, but what turned out to be a more talented line. And it took LSU basically half a season to figure itself out, where you knew your starting 5 a year ago, but they were learning a new coach and really struggled. This year, it took you half a season to figure out who your starters were going to be, and once you did, that unit got much better as the season went along, and you can really see how the arrow is pointing up there on the offensive line, as every starter, save one, of course, Anthony Bradford going pro, is going to be back for next season. So all in all, I give the LSU offense averaging 34 points a game, 453 yards per game, a very solid A grade offensively. Yes, there were times this year you would have loved to see them be more productive, like the passing game against Auburn, as we've talked about, the general malaise they had offensively against Arkansas and some of the errors. But if you can improve the running back spot, and become a little more dynamic in the passing game, you could have one of the best offenses in college football, but clearly a gigantic step up with Brian Kelly and Mike Denbrock calling plays to what you had a year ago with Jake Peetz as a first-time play caller, and the numbers bear it out. LSU averaged 8 points and 100 yards per game more this year than a year ago. That was a very clear improvement year to year. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.